I of course, want to talk about the international piece and where this all fits in the world. But as I was coming in the door, Rory kind of cornered each of us, I think, coming in, and he said, "Can you tell us something personal, something about your experience in global education and in global citizenship education?" So what came to me, actually, it's something that was actually packing up lots of things and helping people with different things recently, and I found some old things of my own, and including an old suitcase from New York, and in it was, I've just dropped it over to my office there, a hideous purple snakeskin print evening dress. And that dress is actually an interesting example of a lot of maybe some of my experiences of not maybe learning about the global issues, but education in the street, so street education. That dress was the dress I wore many years ago in New York in Union Square on an international May Day protest, which was a protest for migrant workers who couldn't, first of all, they were celebrating on May 1st, unlike the American Labor Day, and they were also, by their nature, they needed to be anonymous in their protest. So the form the protest took was actually a Mexican wrestling match in the middle of Union Square, and I was one of the baddies. So I was wearing my hideous purple snakeskin dress with another person in a matching dress, and we represented the fashion victims. And the plucky young worker who was in their mask for anonymity was wrestling with us, but also trying to explain to us how, in fact, they were really the fashion victim. We were fashion victims in different senses. We were there in our glamorous, terrible evening wear, and they were the people working in the sweatshops and earning almost nothing to create these garments. And it was maybe it's a kind of a very rough and ready, but when you have crowds to communicate to, you're trying to communicate that key point, and that point which is there in a lot of citizenship education, which is the connection, that this is connected, that you're already a part of it. You are already linked to what is happening around the world and in different places, that you are already connected and part of it. And what happens through the education, and many more examples over the years with Trócaire, with Comhlamh, who are, an incredible organization for that education of telling people you're connected. You are part of this. And what you can be is empowered as part of it. You can understand how you are connected to it. And that gives you the capacity to act in different ways, to make changes and be part of changes, to build new connections and new solidarities. And it allows you to help work with others to remake those parts of the world and those aspects of how things work that you think should change. And it kind of links back all the way through different other kinds of examples of campaigning and activism, but it links back to some of what I'm doing when I'm here in the Oireachtas. It's a line I come back to all the time when I'm when people are maybe disengaged with politics and they don't feel it's relevant. And it's the idea that in the end, policy and politics, this is all the decisions we make about how we want to live together. And that happens at every level. That's decisions about how you want to live together in your town, in your family, in your town, in your school. And it links back to how we want to live together on this kind of shared planet. And global citizenship is the thing that education is what equips people to feel, to be part of that decision, to demand. Sometimes you have to really demand and fight your way to get to be part of that decision. We look to the beautiful visions people were saying earlier, the question of the different colours and diversity. It's the kind of thing that makes you ask the questions of who's getting to be part of this decision? Who's in the room for these decisions? It makes you think about what are the values that are determining it, when we were talking about that values in decision-making point. You know, and where is well-being? Like, what is this an atmosphere of bullying? Is this an atmosphere of equality, of democracy? So those questions, they come from that first key realization, which is that we are connected, that decisions are being made, that they affect how we all live together. And then you move into, how can I link? How can I be empowered? How can I connect to it? And that's why right now we're at such a crucial point in history, because we are seeing a wave of, yes, the very concerning things, the militarization that we're seeing, the solidity back to the idea of kind of big powers and client states, and we're seeing an attempt to kind of maybe pull power away from people again. And yet, when I think it was very true what Kirsten said about having hope. There's a lot of reasons for hope, because actually, those points of light that we see around the world, they are all examples of global citizenship. They are all moments when decisions were made that were about a collective humanity. The Declaration of Human Rights. The Declaration of Human Rights. And that whole world of international law that came out of World War II and after not just after World War II, but after World War II and centuries of colonialism before that and centuries of might is right and empire. That idea of, radical idea, of all humanity being equal and equally mattering. That's an incredibly powerful moment. That was global citizenship. And then the Sustainable Development Goals. That vision for 2030, and that's why this strategy going to 2030 really matters, is to hold the idea of what 2030 should look like. An actual picture there, you know, in detail, a blueprint, which is a reminder that there's a world we could have in 2030, which would be a better world, and a more sustainable world, and a more inclusive world, and better in every way. And the Paris Agreement, the climate targets, all of that international. And what's really interesting is that even as some of the most powerful people in the world pull away from the United Nations, from that international law, from that, people are holding on to it. People are still talking about their human rights, even in situations where those human rights are being trampled on. People are still talking about a sustainable world, even when they see the damage being done by some of the biggest corporations, for example, in the world. People are holding to those ideas because they're their ideas. They're ideas that came out of common humanity and connection. And people see that connection. So that matters. And I feel like when we talk about global citizenship education, it's your citizens of an amazing world filled with amazing other people, with huge possibilities that are in reach, with ideas that are already on the table that belong to you collectively and to all of us collectively. And that is an incredible prize. So it is an empowerment to make sure that people take and step into the power they have already. And I wanted to just highlight a couple of things I love about the new strategy. I think it's a really great new strategy, but really quick things. The fact that it engages in Northern Ireland is so important, when not just social cohesion funding cut from Northern Ireland, but sadly we're seeing social cohesion funding along with aid cuts to the global south. We're seeing social cohesion funding cut across Europe at a time when we need to be building peace. And that is something Ireland brings to the table, is understanding that the way you build peace is not by more and more weapons, but in fact by creating spaces where people talk to each other. That's crucial, and this is another example of that. Another thing that is important about it is that it talks about the curriculum. And that is that piece, and I'm so delighted to hear Cathal speaking and to know that he's there in the Education Committee and gets it. Because at a time when we're hearing, you know, this race to get AI into the education system, it's actually what we need in the education system is humanity in its wider sense, the opposite. More and more humanity to be brought into it. And I think disinformation gets talked about a lot as if it's individuals online. But when you look to some of what's happening, sadly, for example, in the United States and others, they go straight after the curriculum. They go after the education system, and that's happening worldwide. So actually having a curriculum which gives the truth of history, gives the connection that is there, and talks to people about how they're part of the wider world, and putting that across all of the bits of the curriculum, geography, history, everything. That's amazing. Last piece, and I'll finish. The Global South, and I love that, I think it's point 11 in the strategy. There's a commitment to strengthening the connection with voices from the Global South, and that is crucial now. The young people of the world, in Africa, in South America, but in Africa in particular. And we see Gen Z rebellions happening in different places. We see activism. It is so important that there are solidarities and connections with the young people, between young people here in Ireland and the young people across the Global South, and that they are given that space to create and shape a future, and that there's conversations happening together around that. And that's a really exciting part of the strategy. And that's what's going to create a moment in 2030 where we look back and we say, look at that amazing citizenship education that happened, and look at the new, better ideas that have come from the young people of the world for what we do from 2030 to 2035. Thank you.